The Manhattan grid of the site is reflected in the library as informed by its differing spatial qualities, elements, and programs. On a larger scale, the relationship between what starts creating business versus residential areas and the tightened streets surrounding the site contribute to the grid system. The differing spaces made by these grids inform a need for a new program or element in these spaces on the macro and micro scale.
A rigid grid is created with the layout of the streets and blocks of the Upper East Side. The only disruptions to this grid on the east side are the East River and the FDR Drive. Heading closer to the site, smaller scale grids within the street blocks are found, informing a division of buildings, ownership, and various programs.
Solid and void spaces are produced with the grid system. Solid spaces, being the buildings, which can also be seen as private spaces, are found in the areas in between the grid. And void spaces, or here, public spaces, are the streets making the actual grid. Different experiences are created by the organization of the grid. York Avenue, being a larger street, traffics loud public noise from cars, buses, and consumers in the area. The street also separates the library from the Bayard Taylor School, found right across the street. The quiet nature of the library contrasts the loud and busy school. Similarly, on the perpendicular East 78th Street, a more quiet residential area is found, and is only interrupted when it meets York Avenue. The spatial organization of the grid creates spaces for various and contrasting programs, all in close proximity to one another.
Zooming closer into the site, a similar grid is seen within the library itself. The positioning of the overhead lights creates a grid on the ceiling, which is further reflected in the positioning of the bookshelves and the making of spaces within the library. These factors all work together to create a grid and plan and organize the spaces and programs in the library, which dictate the experience felt in person. Space-making devices are added to the language of the grid and section off areas for specific programs. On the basement floor and throughout the library, bookshelves follow the grid and create their own smaller-scale grid systems, sectioning off private areas. A perimeter of potted plants outside of the basement level is used to suggest space for a garden. On the first and second floors, furniture is added to suggest a need for a new program, like a carpet for a younger audience. On the third and upper floors, walls are used to divide and create public and private spaces, similar to the streets found in the Upper East Side grid. The fourth and fifth floors, only accessible to staff, break the continuity of the public vertical circulation path.
On an even smaller scale, grids can be found on the facade of several walls in the library. On the basement floor, we observe the continuity in the grid pattern evident in the alignment of washroom fixtures and cabinet doors. This continuity is, however, interrupted by a partition wall, creating a distinct separation between the spaces. Furthermore, the micro-disruption within this pattern, such as the ventilation frame on the washroom doors, serve as a subtle yet distinguishable elements that break the visual continuity and add layers of complexity to the built environment.
The language of the rigid Manhattan grid is adopted on several different scales within the surrounding side of the Webster Library. Whether that means within or outside the library, grid systems can be extracted and further direct the organization of solid and void, private and public spaces, and various programs throughout the site.